Hey there, and welcome to Swimming with Sharks. I'm your host, Kevin Dean, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we navigate the fast-moving waters of AI in the enterprise. On this episode of Swimming with Sharks, I sit down with David Pearlman, VP of Education and Healthcare at Adobe, to dive into how AI is transforming learning, leadership, and the future of work. Are you ready to dive in? Let's go. David, it is great to have you on the show today. So, for the audience, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
You know, Kevin, it's always fun when I get to interact with people that I've listened to, and much the same way, many paths cross and there's many intersections in life. So it's great to be here with you today. At the end of the day, we're many things. I'm a storyteller, a father, an investor, an author, or soon to be released book, Lead by Design, and is the working title. And I also happen to be a leader in the education team at Adobe. And so I run about half North America and spent, I don't know, 23 years at this little company called Microsoft that, I was early employee at around 99, 2000.
Mm.
And I had gone to work for a company and they were acquired by Microsoft. So I went from a 1,300 person company to a however many 80,000 people, I think at the time.
Easy.
And it's been phenomenal. So it's been a great journey. Still have a couple of kids in college and, quasi adulting and, having fun enjoying the journey.
Man, that is so awesome. Probably like myself, we're living in exciting times where we're seeing the rate of change moving faster than we ever have seen it before. What do you think about all the changes that we're seeing right now? How is all of this striking you?
Working where I've worked in technology for 30 odd years, some time in the military, nothing stands still. What I think we're seeing now is a pendulum in a variety of areas, whether it be politics, business, technology, education, that's been going from the left to the right, where before it was probably a little more centered, right? And so I think that the extremes have gotten more extreme. The center has kind of gotten marginalized or outspoken. And so, given some of the platforms that we have today, both to create, to storytell, to have an impact on others, whether they be inside or outside of our geography, inside or outside of our socioeconomic class, there's never been a greater time that you as an individual can have an impact. And this is a perfect case in point.
Man, I love that. Right now, this is the time to have an impact that people can definitely to do that. When you think about, I think about the rate of change with technology and things moving as fast as they are. I think that has an impact on, like, I think this is good with you being in the education space. People need to learn almost, it seems like, quicker than they ever had before. What's your take on the way that people need to start thinking about education, training themselves, training their organizations? What is your take on that?
So I think that my intro, right, which was kind of my story, I think I've had 6 or 7 different, very distinct roles, right? And some of them are entrepreneurial, some of them are big organizations. The days, I think, of having a job, keeping that job for 30 years, retiring from that job with a pension or a retirement that you can live on, I don't want to say they're gone, but it's really, really hard, right? I think we used to see that before, but listen, if you were a metal fabricator in 1952, coming out of, Korea, World War II, you could probably have a job for 30 years working somewhere. I don't know that many of those jobs exist today, right? Funding methodologies change, job requirements. You need to be a constant learner, right? And for some people, that's really hard, right? So we need to be able to create the space as leaders, as mentors, as employers to allow people to learn. And not everybody learns the same way. Hey, we're going to sit down in front of this laptop and I'm going to be in a lecture hall for the next hour and a half, twice a week for the next 12 weeks. A lot of learning doesn't take place that way. So it's parallel learning, right? Hey, I'm doing this job, but I've been on a bunch of podcasts. I've had my own podcast. Now all of a sudden, I need to slow down. I need to be able to speak coherently. So guess what? I'm going to go take a class on how to do public speaking, although I do it every day. It's very different than in this format. And so AI, for example, I've had some AI coaching where we can record something. We can say, hey, you need to slow down. You need to probably be a little bit more demonstrative in your facial expressions. And so we can get this coaching. So the point is, I think learning education has become very customized, and those organizations that don't enable that will find a really hard time still being relevant, right? And whether that's an Ivy League that has a $30 billion $30 billion endowment, or a state school that has a $2 million endowment. People want to consume education where they're at, when they want, in the way that they want. And I'm not saying that's all good. There's still a lot of benefit in the shared learning experience. So it continues to change. I don't know that it's going to stay exactly the way it is for very long, right? Because now more and more organizations are trying to deliver very much asynchronous learning, master classes, all these other things. So micro certifications, credentialing, all these things are going to become really, really important, not just a 4 or 6 year degree.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And you brought up, how AI is really having a role and an impact. How do you think AI is going to impact the way that people learn and what people need to learn?
How will people learn or leverage using AI, right? Will it be used for good or for, I don't want to say evil is not the right word, but for,
Hey,
different criteria, right?
very
So
nefarious activities that could happen potentially, right?
here's the little fact, Kevin.
Tell me.
AI is not new, right? AI has,
We know that, right?
right, 25, 30 years. I still had a full head of hair when
Me
AI came
too.
out. Perfect. Look what AI has done to us, right? So we think about what is AI, right? It's predictive analytics, right? Back in the day, large data sets, making decisions. We would look at statistical analysis in Excel, or we'd be using some other database models. So now AI has put this power, right? So think about the learning possibilities in this phone right here, right? We now have something that used to fill up a room 25 years ago now on our phone. We have the ability. I'm a horrible speller. And when I say horrible, it's almost amazing that I can construct a coherent language in English and a couple of other languages. When it comes to writing, it's something that I have to do. I chicken scratch thing out. I carry a yellow pad around with me everywhere. And I have
Yep.
stacks of these things, and I write down random things in the middle of the night. AI has enabled me to become a really proficient writer. Um, I went through an exercise starting about a year ago where somebody was giving me structured interview questions. So how is it going to change how we're learning? And we created a Dave Pearlman chat GPT over probably 25 hours structured interviews. I've had my kids test it. It gives pretty dad-like Dave answers, right? Hey, I didn't do this thing. What are the consequences? What would Dave say? Well, you knew you had to get it done in the time frame that I said to get it done,
Yeah.
and you also had to have some kind of quality in there. So, it's amazing that now I have, somebody that can help me parent. Not really, but it's fun experience. So AI, I think, will free us up from a lot of the mundane tasks. In my world, right, I get literally hundreds of emails a day. I have now been able to source through and be able to change what it is that I need to do. And so I lead a team of people that, have some cross-functional roles. I cannot keep all the things that I need to straight in my head. I'm going into a meeting with Kevin Dean. I want to really learn more about swimming with sharks. I open up Adobe Acrobat Assistant or Copilot or Gemini and say, hey, I want to know everything about Kevin Dean. Give me a little bit of background. What are his key talking points? And boom, I have a list now that I used to have an admin or an account manager or manager give me these summary sheets right before I go into these meetings. They don't have to do it. If they're smart, they still do it for me, right? But they use AI. So the
Yep.
ability to ingest information, pull out the relevant parts, understand what it is that you need to do, and it impacts every single piece of your life, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot of gems in what you brought out here. Just an interesting fact. I was just reading this article when it comes to AI and what's going on in the world. There's always this debate about what's China doing, what's the U.S. doing, who's learning the fastest. And I don't know if you knew this, but starting this year, like all children in China are now mandatory. It's mandatory from kindergarten that they start learning it with AI. Isn't that crazy?
It's wild, and yet here in the U.S., right? Just to give you a function of what it looks like here. So ChatGPT kind of exploded AI, right? So that's the Microsoft product, along with the outside venture that Sam Altman started with some big investments. Those decisions in U.S. education were really challenging to come by. First, it was, everybody was living in, on the river, the Nile, right? And so they were in
Yeah.
Egypt and they were all in denial, right? We weren't going to use it. We had to ban it. And there was a pretty concerted effort by a lot of leaders in higher education to make some proclamations about what was going to be allowed and not be allowed. Well, guess what? Faculty and staff had already been using it. Students were certainly using it. Grammarly, right? That's really AI, right? In the background, helping you craft these papers and
That's it, right?
the local fraternity that had the test bank, right? Now all of a sudden they can put an LLM model over it. And I know this was going on in some of the computer science schools.
Oh yeah.
Answer and craft all your stuff, right? Your code and your other things. And so when I hear China doing that, China has a very top-down policy, right? In what they can do in education. Here it's a little more freewheeling, and I think it'll get a little more freewheeling given some of the I don't want to say overreach, but there's some ties with our current administration and having that impact on education. And maybe it's needed, maybe it's not. I'm not going to sit here and talk about that. But what it will do is it's going to change what we do in education, how we do that in education. It's going to change grant writing. It already is. I mean, it's very standard procedure, right? Higher education, academic, medical centers. They need to go out and look for some new stuff, whatever that stuff is, and they release an RFP. My answer used to be, hey, listen, if we weren't there to help write the RFP, we're not responding to it as an organization. Well, now very quickly with AI, I can ingest that. So Adobe Acrobat Assistant in this case, ingest the PDF, say, hey, what are the relevant points? What have we previously answered? Please fill in these answers. And it's amazing. We get 80, 85% accuracy where there was a team of 5 people introducing going through these things, and it was a 2-week process. We can turn them around in a matter of a day or two. Cost effectiveness has gone through the roof. I'm willing to take some risks and engaging with some people that we might not normally do because it's brought down the cost. Think about as a podcast host, right? So you run this audio through something. What do you use?
Yes. So we use Riverside, and then
Riverside, Adobe Podcast Studio, right? So we can take out all the ums from me speaking.
That's right.
We can make my hair look even better. I've done generative video and that's laptop kind of stuff. It's amazing what you can do. Create a voice, create a song. So for us in the podcast industry and authors and content creators, it has changed what you do. You used to have a staff of 5 or 6 people to do some of these things. One person was a graphic artist, one person was a social media person. You can probably get away with one full-time person to do a lot of that stuff, maybe 2, if you're making a living on it and supporting people. Fair?
That's fair. That's fair. So what you said, I don't like the controversy, but I'm going to bring it up, right? So you just gave us a use case on how AI can help people be more efficient, and because they're more efficient, that means you don't need as many people doing what they were doing before in order to get the job done. So that sounds a lot like to me that AI could potentially reduce the number of jobs that are needed in certain organizations. What do you think about that?
Here's where we get into the controversy, right? Where, gosh forbid, technology is replacing people's jobs. So let's dissect that apart a little bit, right? And so we gave that example of the post-World War II manufacturing boom in the United States. Change is constant, right? In a period of 20 years, from 1910 to 1930, we had, I forget the exact statistic, but it was like 7 million people associated in 1910 to 1930 working in the horse industry, right? Horse, buggies, whips, wheels, all these other things. That entire industry disappeared in most of America by 1930, right? With the Ford and some of the other things that came out. And we can see these cycles happening again and again. And so where people have some panaceas, right? It's not going to solve everything. What I think it's going to do, Kevin, and this is where I want to spend most of my time and energy, is focusing on how it optimize the time that we spend on non-value added tasks. So maybe we had 4 or 5 people doing something to create this podcast. Maybe you do some publications, maybe you do some TV interviewing, maybe you do a little bit of advertising here and there. Well, now maybe those other 2 people that were really in the production side of things can now go out and help you scale, right? So I think it doesn't replace what everybody's doing, but allows them to go do more value added things.
Yeah, I love that. So we're still going to need people, right? But people are just going to be doing different things. Is that fair?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
perfect example, right? My one of my favorite examples, and I go through it on a daily basis, is I'm traveling probably every other week, about 3 nights a week. And I have my senior VP sits out in the UK, the other VP is out in San Jose. And so I get these asks all the time at various odd times, right? One 7 hours ahead and one 3 hour behind. It could drive you nuts, right? Trying to be
Right.
immediately. So what I do is I use AI and say, please summarize all the emails from Karen for the last day. And guess what? I get them all summarized and I can actually answer them instead of by email. I'll just give a summary email. Hey, I saw you had a couple questions today. Here it is, real time. I stick it in Teams or Slack or whatever we're doing. And I took 30 emails and got them down to maybe one or two communications. How cool is that?
That's very cool. That is very cool. And so, what that does for you is that allows you to be a better leader because you're not spending time on things that aren't adding value. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair. I'm focusing on the people instead of the process.
Oh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. So, what do leaders need to be thinking about as they try to think about two things? One, how do they use AI within their current workflow, and how do they, two, roll it out to their organizations? What do leaders need to think about?
You know, so let's take the second one first, right? How do you roll it out to your organization? Depending upon the organization, they may be in a very regulated environment, right? And so that could be, GDPR, it could be HIPAA, FERPA, all these things just basically around privacy and data protection. There are a lot of concerns for a lot of organizations. You talk about Department of Defense, you talk about Health and Human Services, where there are concerns about what's going where. And so you need to have a policy in place. You need to have the tools to enforce that policy. You need to have the um, institutional stamina to get through some of the noise around some of these subjects to get those policies in place. Because a policy without enforcement, guess what? It's just another policy. Kevin, you're not supposed to do something. It nanobytes, the giant technology communications firm that's changing the space-time continuum. You have a policy about what's acceptable use on your cell phone. You know what? There's nothing I can do from you stopping and sending something that shouldn't really be sent. We can put in some nanny controls, but if somebody really wants to go do it, so having those policies, understanding, having an educated workforce, understanding how that sets up both federal and state guidelines or even EU or NAFTA, some of these other things. So that's the policy and enforcement. We need to think about that first, and then we need to educate our organizations. From the tactical of what should organizations actually be doing, listen, they're all using AI. I don't care what you think you're doing or who you are. Somebody's using AI in your organization. You're kidding yourself if you're not. Well, it's against company policy. Okay, well, on their cell phone, even if you have it split between work apps and personal apps, they're using, Gemini Copilot to go look up stuff.
Yeah.
They're using it to send you an email because they know that Dave Pearlman's a really horrible speller and he's never written things this good. Your reviews that are getting done, right? When you have to do 30 reviews, guess what? You're probably using AI to help you a little bit. So large organizations need to think about and catalog what is already being used, right? And so you need to have an environment of trust that people will actually share that information with you. There's tools that you can go out and discover that stuff. Once you have a catalog of that, I think it's better to bring it all in than having it around the periphery of your security perimeter as an enterprise organization. So most schools now, they've probably picked one or two major tools that they're using, or academic medical centers. Academic medical centers, by the way, have been using things like Dragon Speech and Nuance, and actually Dragon Speech is owned by Nuance.
Yeah, for a long time.
You're trying to go back and finally see that doctor that's going to fix my amazing hair growth. And again, we have to laugh at ourselves a little bit, but when they're taking notes, wouldn't you rather have them taking notes inside of, there's a number of Cerner or, a few of the other big dogs that are out there, Epic. They've been doing this for a long time, right? And so it's freeing up doctors,
And we want the doctors freed up because there's a shortage of them, right? So these are great. These are really great use cases. I love your approach, and I also like what you said about bringing all of the AI in, right? that reminds me, for a long time there's been shadow IT. Now we're seeing the rise of shadow AI, right? So we've got to be wary of that. With everything that's happening right now, what's exciting you the most? What are you looking forward to continuing to work on?
There's so many things that are exciting for me right now, both personally and professionally. Out in the industry right now, there's a lot of external excitement that isn't necessarily always real, right? As we get into the economy and politics and some other things, right? And that's that pendulum. The
Yeah.
nature of things tends to be it eventually gets back to the middle. And now, so what's exciting right now is trying to find that middle ground where you can service your customers and the faculty and staff, and then in the med centers. At the end of the day, it's the patients, right? And so what I have found without fail, my North Star is what's going to positively impact students, right? And so there are days that can be extremely challenging in these jobs, right? I'm sure yours as well, where we're pulled in a lot of different directions, a lot of different priorities.
Yep.
And I just had the opportunity to spend time with one of the state of New York SUNY schools and did a sales triathlon, right? I needed to get out of the office. I had had a long run for a couple of weeks. I had volunteered to do this thing. It's probably the fourth year in a row. But speaking with 40 or 50 students, doing mock interviews and doing, them trying to sell a bunch of pseudo executives some business case, and then doing some speed selling on, give me an elevator pitch, can we get investment? Just what a great way to get out of your own way, stop thinking about all the nonsense. When does the next TPS report due, right? And so that's from Office Space for some of you that are listening that may be a little bit younger. It's never about the task, right? It's really about the people. And so don't get lost in the process. What is the outcome that you want to do? And so what's exciting for me is the way that AI can change and provide equity and accessibility to a lot of really powerful technologies and learning opportunities that just didn't exist.
That's awesome. I love that. I absolutely love that. And that's something to look forward to. That's just great. So let me ask you this. I am a big music fan. Big music fan, my friend. Can you tell me, what are you listening to right now? Can you give me a song that you love that I should go out and listen to?
Yes, and I'm going to have to look up the artist's name, although I have several, but the one right now that I'm listening to is, I want to say it's a Tennessee Smoke Show. Hold on, I'm going to pull it up on Spotify.
All right, pull it up.
My kids always give me a hard time because I'll listen to a lot of the same songs for a really long time. But it's Oklahoma Smoke Show by Zach Bryan.
Okay, nice.
And Americana. I grew up in a very small rural town in upstate New York, and I think I graduated with about 145 people in my senior class. And we still have a place in Rochester, New York, but spend a lot of time down in Hilton Head Island area in South Carolina. And so it's just great. It's one of those car road shows kind of songs, and you're just hanging out. It's got a great sound.
I love those. Those are great songs. So I'm going to go plug that in as soon as we're done and jam out to that.
Awesome.
Yeah. David, this has been so great. Thank you for coming and hanging out and chatting with me for a little bit today. I think that the audience listening today is going to truly find some great nuggets to take home with them.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Keep your eyes out for Lead by Design coming out in June or July.
Will do. Thanks. Wow, what a conversation. David reminded us that the future of learning and leadership isn't about resisting change. It's about designing for it. Whether you're leading a team, running a university, or just trying to keep pace of AI, the real differentiator is how fast you can learn, adapt, and apply. It's not about replacing people, it's about refocusing them on what really matters. If today's chat got you thinking about where your organization stands, don't wonder, let's find out. Take our AI readiness assessment and see how prepared you are to lead in this new era. Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Swim with Sharks.